Thank you. Okay, now moving on to item 23, the Linwood Woolston pool delegations.
Happy to move.
Okay, 23. Okay, so we've got Sarah Templeton indicating she would be happy to move. Are there any questions for staff? Okay, so John, if you'd like to come to the table and your team. Thank you. So questions from Glenn, Phil and Jimmy. Glenn and Pauline.
Thank you. Thank you. It looks a bit gold-plated, but my question is more around the actual... Don't worry about it. My question is about the site selection and the scope. Will this be done consistent with the aquatics strategy, John?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So it's the overall figure is pulled out of somewhere. Yep. But what is built will fit in with the...
Yeah, yes it will, and that's also consistent with the financial and other information on participation that's included that makes up the draft 1828 LTP. Yeah. So it's all consistent.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you. Dave.
Just a quick question around the process. Is this a similar process that the community went through for the QE2 pools?
Good question, and Dave, I probably have to think about that answer, and I don't think I can answer that emphatically now. QE2 was slightly different in that we appointed a community advisory group who gave information and advice to the board and to council on the location. What we are recommending to the council is that delegated authority rests absolutely with the community board. So it is different in that respect. Other differences or similarities I'd need to have a bit more of a think over.
No, it just seems pretty similar anyway, so I have confidence in that process that QE2 went through, and it seems like a situation where the site selection and the scope is being approved by the board, which is what we did at in the Bill and then the Bill Pegasus ward. So I'm very supportive of that.
There is a similarity in that as officers we believe just like the Burwood Coastal Community Board as you were then, the current board are best placed to understand the community and make those decisions. So it's similar in that respect.
Thank you. Jimmy.
The question is, particularly you mentioned if a delegate from council to the community board, particularly in the kind of scope and the design. If in case those the funding budget is all outside of the funding limitation and also operational best practice and the scope, so this compliant with the council view of how to mitigate this effect.
If I'm understanding your question correctly, the delegation sort of notes that it is within council's overall budget and broad view of the facility as in the draft LTP. And it also says that council retains the delegation to award the final build contract. So we would not envisage this at all, but worst case scenario, if there were differences of opinion between the board and the council, the council has the last ability to say yes or no. We would never envisage it coming to that point. It certainly didn't with QE2. It didn't with Graham Condon, Jelly Park. I can't envisage it. It's a small risk, but it is covered.
If that's true, some questions, why you particularly mention here, this advantage option that we see.
Yeah.
Why you putting this?
Yeah, because in order to write a fair and reasonable report, it is appropriate that we allude potential risks to council so you can understand them and ask us questions on them. We think the risk is very small. We've said it's very small. It's a small disadvantage, but it doesn't change our recommendation, which is quite emphatic.
One more question.
Yep.
Regarding to the dedication, I'm not sure whether have any it's regulation or it's act like a site selection or scope and the final concept design from the council delegate. This belong to the council delegation registry or some other any regulation.
Yeah. Depending on the site that the community board select, if they select a site that comes with a different set of delegations, let's say it's a reserve or it's a site that we might have to purchase and different delegations are required, we would come back to council again with another report, either recommending or not that the community board have those delegations. So it's probably fair to say that the site that, a number of the sites that are preferred don't have that, so it won't be necessary, but if it is, we'll come back and request a small change.
Thank you.
Thank you. Pauline, Mike, and then Phil. Pauline.
Yeah, mine's just on the process really. So the budget for this is contingent on the outcome of the LTP.
Yep.
So when would the work commence? When would the community board begin to work on the scope and design?
I'll probably be updated by the project team. The board began to work on the scope and design probably this time last year. We worked with the board and we engaged some contractors and we engaged the board support staff to understand all the work that had been done in the community to date, to ask a few more questions, a little more stakeholder consultation, and we brought that back to the board. And Pauline, that informed a lot of the information that went into the aquatic strategy and the draft LTP on this. So it's probably just over a year ago now.
So what I'm trying to get at is that there is a risk to the community board that if they're going ahead now with scope and design, which directly impacts on the budget, and if the budget was either reduced or eliminated, well, I hope it doesn't, but there is a risk there. How do they manage that?
I think that's a risk with every project. A project has to start the best intentions. In our officers' belief, this project has been in the 2015 25 LTP, updated by various annual plans. There is always a risk that circumstances might change, but we have to be in a position to work with the board to move forward, understand the scope and nature of the project, so if there are any changes that need to be made, we've got a piece of work ready there to be changed, and we've got enough information to wisely inform change. So it is a risk, and it's a risk with any project. Any other community swimming pool or sports project, there might be a decision in the LTP process that changes it. We are moving ahead with the vast majority of our projects, and we're not stopping them because of this risk. I think it's something we can manage.
And that would relate to any capital project. I don't think anybody would be suggesting we would stop work on all capital projects just because we're consulting on a draft LTP, which, after all, is our proposal for the final LTP.
So to just go one step further, if this was approved today to give the board the delegation over the scope and the concept design, and they will be working within the suggested LTP budget now, if for any reason that would changed, their scope and design would also have to change, correct?
The delegation, it resolves that it is in line with the draft and then the final 1828 long-term plan. So that condition precedent, if you like, would remain. And so whatever council's decisions are, the scope and the location would be subject to that.
So this is still all subject to the LTP?
As any capital project is.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Mike. Thank you. Okay, so this has been... Oh, Phil, you had a question, sorry.
I just wondered, do we have, in terms of the scope, do we have any estimate too, well, that's the capital part, of the operational cost of running the pool?
Yes, Phil, we do. I don't have it with me. If you recall, pre-Christmas, we presented the updated aquatic facility strategy, where we identified and predicted the cost to run all of our aquatic and recreation sporting facilities over the term of the LTP. Informing that calculation was a facility of the size and scope and function currently envisaged. So we've got as accurate a picture as we can at this time, and the OPEX is provided for within the draft LTP.
This sounds like more like a question that would be appropriate for a LTP discussion and consideration than one about delegating a decision-making process to a community board. Yanni.
I was just wondering if we'd considered a design and build type approach like we've done with some other facilities to kind of enable progress to happen a bit quicker. And if so, why was that ruled out? Or is that ability still able to be done?
Yeah, Yanni, I think it's a conversation that the project team would have with the board. Yeah, and it's a conversation that we think the board would be interested in having, and because that does have an effect on scope and concept. So yes, that's absolutely something that we'd envisage happening.
Yep.
And just in regards to the procurement, I know previously there was talk of maybe doing, the QE2, the Southwest, and this together under one procurement to save costs. Obviously, that's probably not likely to happen now. Obviously, there's been a lot of work done at QE2, but is there any consideration given to any economies of scale with our other aquatic facilities in terms of procurement or how we might realise benefits?
I think that's has there been much consideration to date? It has been discussed at a high level. I think once we reach a slightly clear picture of where we're headed with the Hornby area and the Linwood Woolston area, we can pick that discussion up again, but that's certainly a discussion that we can engage with the board and get their views.
Final question is, why are we proposing in the LTP to push funding out even further?
That sounds like an LTP question rather than a decision about delegating to a community board. And that's probably where that will be picked up.
But just so I'm clear, we're currently working on what's in the current long-term plan, not the proposed long-term plan, correct?
This this report notes the draft long-term plan. However, as I think as Pauline covered, if there are any changes, we're not in a position to understand what they might be. So we're going on what we know, and it's the draft. It's what's out there at the moment. Expecting this council to make changes or not as they see fit.
Well, then it's directly relevant to what's in here, because I want to know why staff are proposing to move more money into the final year and what impact that will have on the project.
Well, that's very different than whether we're delegating the decision-making to the community board or not.
No, in this, under 2, the recommendation, so if you read
recommendation number 2.
You read the first one, 1.31a, community consultation based on parameters of the project detailed in the 2015-25 long-term plan as amended by the annual plan. You go down to the staff recommendation, it's changed from what was in the 2015-25 plan to what's updated in the, and it doesn't even say draft, 2018-28 plan, which moves money further out into the final year, which I presume has an impact on the delivery timeframe, because else why would you be moving money out? So, I mean, my preference would be for that to be reflective of what's in the current plan. I don't think we should be making a decision based on something that hasn't been agreed yet. And then if it changes, then it changes.
But the environment in which we're working is that we had a 2015 to 25 long-term plan. We now have a proposal which is out for consultation, which has got amendments to that 2015-25 long-term plan. We obviously, as a council, believe in that proposal, otherwise we wouldn't have put it out as a draft. Therefore, that is the most current thinking around our capital budget. We wouldn't have put out a proposal expecting to make major changes to that unless we hear from communities that we should do so. So for us to have a project here which is aligned with our most recent decision making on the capital budget would be entirely consistent in my view.
We haven't approved a long-term plan.
No, we haven't. We've approved a proposal which is currently out for consultation.
I think the point that Yanni's making, it's a really good one, is that the current resolution says that we're to start working as if it was 2015 to 25 long-term plan, where the funding is in a different place to what's in the draft currently.
So maybe I'm a little bit confused then. If we look at paragraph 2 in the resolution.
Yeah, it says, and operational provision within the 15 to 25 long-term plan.
As updated by the 2018-28 long-term plan.
But that's by the final decision. Yeah.
Just be clear, so we're currently consulting with a time frame. You know, I'll pull up the thing so you guys can see it.
No, don't need to.
Would any of this change your willingness to delegate this to the community board or not?
But
I
it would
think is the
change
question.
that resolution under 2.
So what do you want the resolution changed to?
So if the project timeframes that we're currently consulting are the 2015-25 one, which has a very clear time frame, if that's going to be delayed by number 2 being agreed to today, then I don't want to do it. We've already had significant delay to this project, and I can't see why we should be in the middle of a consultation period with our community around a time frame, putting it at risk, doing it over an even longer time frame.
Will that decision, though, not be made in the long-term plan final decision? The
It's fine.
There's a risk. There's a risk.
Then why would we be consulting on it now then?
Because we want to get on with it.
Isn't all that dependent on actually having a site? I mean, we've had another pool which has been delayed because of the whole site issue, and then the scope. I mean, you're not going to actually know the timeline until that stuff is agreed.
Yeah.
We seem to be getting well off track in terms
Absolutely.
of whether we're choosing to delegate these particular matters to the community board or not.
I'll second this. I'll second this motion.
Yeah, I mean that's.
Just need to get on with it.
I think we should keep it in council. I've got doubts over that.
So what happens if the community board makes a decision before the 1st of July?
There's risk.
Yanni, it's fine. It's fine.
So Andrew, perhaps then instead of having the 2015 to 2025 long-term plan, maybe we should have the draft 2018 to 2028 plan, where the actual money is signalled to be in the long-term plan.
Land and there was some purchase or there was something, you could do something little potentially if it was in terms of this year's plan, because at the moment this year is being ruled by 15. So basically if you want to do anything before then, you've got to be ruled by this long-term plan.
I have no issue with it, but
switch over as soon as you approve the new one.
The question that we've been asked to answer this afternoon is whether we want to delegate this to the board or not. There are a number of issues around where the budget sits and what decisions we make in the long-term plan that are really outside the question of whether we delegate or whether we don't.
Mr. Chair, could I suggest that we take 1B out and revisit that after the LTP? Because all right, I propose an amendment then. Because when you think about it, where are we now? Marching through March? Because it seems to me that there could be a risk of actually that work should not really be begun until the budget's secured.
Jimmy's got another question, and then you've got to move, or I'll be looking for a second.
Thank you. Yeah. Regarding to the staff recommendations 3C, I'm concerned if opening ceremony welcome the community, organized response by the ward. I'm another the Linwood. fiscal and a community board. However, you know, on behalf of the citywide, the people who are eligible to partake in this celebration, it's a good news.
We're now talking about the guest list.
But what's the difference? Whether community board, they might have,
Jimmy, I'll send you an
list,
invitation
list or
personally.
not. And also, this is from the ratepayers rather than from the community board only. All right?
Who knows
Should
will
be
be around by
citywide
then.
celebration. Yeah. Okay, yeah.
Mr Chairman, I think this is another case of council potentially not getting what they wish for. And like, it seems to me, originally these recommendations were... Oh, I thought we were.
So we'll move into debate so that can happen. Sarah's moved this. Who's going to second it?
I will.
Dion will second. Okay. Right.
Just get on with
So
it.
now let's move into debate. Pauline has already indicated that she wants to speak to this. Phil has indicated that he does. Glenn is recommended as also doing the same. So Pauline, Phil, Glenn, Yanni, and then I'll come to both sides of the table.
Excellent. So this, as things have been muddied, this has come to us because the council directly requested that staff come back saying what of this project can be delegated to the community board. And I've checked, and that was a unanimous decision by this council to say what can be, because we believe as a council, and everyone was elected on the platform of strengthening our community boards, both in the last election and the one before. People were very strong on strengthening our community boards and strengthening our communities. And we've done this for some projects. This is probably the biggest one we have done it for at this point for this decision making. This has been something that the board has asked for. The board is very clear on the direction it wishes to take. The board is united in the desire for this pool. The board has had years of practice advocating for it, and for people to start saying at this point that they are reluctant to delegate some parts when they are being told by staff that the staff recommendation is emphatic, not even questioned at all, then I think that those councillors who are questioning that maybe should look to the other projects that are coming up in their community board areas and whether they should have delegations over those.
Thank you. So now moving to Pauline.
Yes, well, I'm in a ward with not many projects, but moving right along, I'm very supportive of community boards having delegations. We had a successful one on our board. We set up a working party with the community, actually, which I would suggest that this community board look at doing. It's their decision. But I'm just really advising caution regarding public expectation, because, you know, to me, you know, barrelling ahead before a budget is actually approved is it could be a little bit of a dangerous thing, because you raise expectations, which is why I wanted to put B separately. But apart from that, I fully support community boards having delegated authority over local projects, and I fully support a community pool in Linwood.
Thank you. Phil.
Well, look, I'll be brief. I just think that clearly we are wanting to trust the community board, and that is a significant part. That's the key of all this, really, and that's why I guess I'd have to say to some councillors, look, don't keep pushing the envelope, and make sure that in fact, you know, you work with council, because in fact, point 2 is clearly that in fact it has to be consistent with what council want to happen. But there's as the points have been made, that the planning for this pool has been a long time in the making, and there's a whole history to it, and overall I'm supportive, but I think it's important that in fact councillors work with the board and work with us as a council too, to make sure that it does happen in a sensible way.
Glenn.
Oh, thank you. I'm supportive. But just on this, QE2 and the origins of this proposal are from entirely different contexts. So for this project, it's been a long time coming, sure, pre-quake, the Easter Recon Sport, or the QE2 centre has an entirely different context out of loss following the earthquakes in 2011. The site selection went well as far as that does go for QE2, but every community board is different and it has their own dynamic. It's important, and it was good to hear through you, John, that this will be done hand in hand with the aquatic strategy, because there is a big question here over expenditure over aquatic facilities in the city, and I think we do need to be open to the possibility of revisiting all of them, and that includes the proposed facility in the centre of the city. And I hear a lot about saving ratepayer dollars. If you're really serious about that, I really want that challenged so that we can make good and make real savings. And that's all I'll say on that at this point.
Yanni.
Yeah, so, you know, this is a really important project to this local community, and it does have an impact on the southeastern communities as well, going all the way out from Taylor's Mistake, Sumner, Redcliffs, Mount Pleasant, Heathcote, through to Bromley, Phillipstown, you know, Charleston, Woolston, Linwood, so, and Avonside. So, you know, this is a facility that, although, you know, local, is very much based in this community board's catchment. That is the whole idea behind it, as I understand it. And it is something that just needs to progress. I'm very concerned to hear people saying it has no confirmed budget. It had a confirmed budget in 2015, and since then it's just been constant delay after delay after delay. We need to get on and get this done. This is an area of the city that has had almost no public investment in public infrastructure outside of, in terms of community facilities, outside of things like the roading and the cycleways. So it's really important that we signal an investment in this community. You will recall the Salvation Army report that talked about people feeling forgotten, feeling like they weren't being listened to. For the 15 years that I've been involved in this area, this has been the #1 issue that has been raised in regards to a community facility that people desperately want. So I think, you know, I have no concerns about delegating this to the local community board, given that they, for many years, with many different members than are currently on the board, have been a strong advocate for it. There is a process underway for the site selection, and, you know, that will be wrapped up shortly, and it's expected by the middle of the year the board will have made that decision. So, you know, I think, you know, it's really important that we keep progressing this project rather than holding it up any further than it's already been held up. This is a community that is pretty much together on possible location and possible facilities. I don't think we're going to see the big debates that are raging in other parts of the city around location or around what should happen where. So let's hope that we can get on and get this done. This really removes, I think, one of the final barriers to us being able to fully engage with our community around what is happening in this area in terms of the facility. So, you know, I'm very supportive of it, and we can deal with the budget through the LTP process, as has been said.
Thank you. Raf.
Yeah, I mean, just to follow up on Phil's point, I mean, we've made the decision there's going to be a pool in Linwood, and we've said to, or Woolston, we've said to the community, you find the site, do the initial scope and design. We've done that, and I think probably actually just focus on that rather than sorting out who's coming to the opening and who's not. And I think then, because there's, you know, often a lot of work in that stuff, it's not straightforward. And then we can work out exactly what the final budget will be, and what the final scope will be. So I think just, you know, take it step by step by step. That's my advice anyway.
Jimmy.
With the point of view, you know, because if a council dedicate to the site location, not any problem. I agree. Even Horsewell, Hornby, Rickton, you know, regarding location, have a kind of a different view, contention. However, I think that's a small issue. But if you dedicate to the scope and the concept design, in case it will be happen, even the star mentioned, Joe mentioned, is probably the possibility is low. If you over the funding the budget, if you breach the operational best practice, if you outside of the scope, how to mitigate this the effect? This is my particular the concern. You know, so I agree. It's just council delegate to the site selection to the community board, rather than the scope and the final council design. Probably still keep in the council.
I'll come to others who haven't already spoken. I'll come back.
To talk to my amendment, that's not my amendment.
So,
My amendment should read defer the decision to...
no, so what we're going to do is put B separate. Oh, so you wanted it defer. So your amendment is to defer that decision until after the LTP decision making is complete. Okay, so if we can reflect that, and I'll put that as an amendment in that case, rather than just putting it separately. Thank you. All right, thank you for that clarification. Any further debate? Dave?
Just do it.
Thank you. Okay, I'll just say a couple of words and then Sarah, I'll come back to you for your right of reply. Yeah, I mean, like others, I'm really keen to move on with this. We seem to have spent, well, I'm certainly aware that we've spent as long as I've been on council talking about this repeatedly and over a long period of time. And it sounds as though it's a debate that's been going on for a lot longer than that. So it's good to actually finally get this progressed. Other comments that have been made around delegating to community boards. I mean, we've got a position that we've talked about a lot in this term and the previous term of council around delegating decision-making on local projects so that decisions can be made in local communities by locally elected members, and this is a perfect example of that. There's obviously been some discussion this afternoon about the long-term plan and the effects of that. At least the decision we're making today, whilst it acknowledges that there are capital funding decisions that we'll be making towards the end of June that may change things, those decisions may not change things, and it allowed us to get on with the work around the site selection and the scope and design in the meantime, in anticipation of us confirming the proposal that we've put out in the draft long-term plan. And obviously we're waiting to hear from the community on that through the consultation process. So I'm supportive of the original resolution. I certainly am also supportive of the decision around scope being left in there for the community board to get on with straight away as well, so that we can get this progressed in anticipation that it will be funded in the LTP. Sarah.
Thank you. I had some specific things to address for various councillors, but I think what I'll do is I'll just say, I don't know how many of you have had experience of working on these types of community facilities projects in the past, but the fact that we've only just started going out for consultation on the site selection currently should give people some confidence that we won't be up to approving a final design in June. So anyone will know that 3 months isn't long enough to go through the entire consultation on site selection, to get a report to a community board to choose the site, to then do an analysis and see what's needed, to get the scope sent out, to get some design work done, and anyone who thinks that that could be done by June before the budget's approved is dreaming, frankly. So to defer the decision, all that simply means is staff having to come back to this chamber once again with another report on the delegations to a community board. I would love for the process to happen that quickly, but the reality is we need to get onto it. This community, while different to QE2, as Glenn suggested, in that community were very focused on the loss of their facility post-quake, and understandably so. This community never had anything to start with. They are the most deprived community in our city, second most deprived in the country, lowest car ownership, lowest literacy rates, and we have, as a council, raised their expectations and dashed them in the past, in the early 2000s. We have raised their expectations in every annual and long-term plan for the last 4 years, and for us to now be saying we are likely to dash those expectations is frankly a nonsense. Thank you.
So I'll put the amendment first. The amendment is to defer the Thank you. So moved by Pauline. Is there a seconder for the amendment? So Jimmy will second. So I'll now put the amendment to defer consideration of delegations until after the adoption of the long-term plan. All those in favour? So defer consideration of delegations on scope and design of... Yep. All right, great. All right, so I'll put that amendment. All those in favour? Aye. Against? No. Okay, so that fails. Those who voted in favour, Jimmy and Pauline. Okay, so if we can note that. So now I'll put the whole resolution. All those in favour? Aye. Against? That's carried.